Welcome back to our study on the book of Romans. This is Sonship Establishment, and this is going to be session 48. Where we're talking about the first part of that being made subject to vanity, that the creature's incapacity to fully function. Now, what I'm way more concerned about than nailing down all of the nuances of that is that the creature is not able to function. And when we talked about that, Linda was right, because God did not want the adversary to have control of the creature. By the way, if he had, there was a distinction between the heaven and the earth, even from the very beginning. The Bible never talks about them, just uses one word to just talk about them both. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then it talks about the heavens, and then it talks about and the earth. The earth was without form and void, or the animals that he created on the earth, or the things he put up in the heaven, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and that kind of bit. There's always, and if you follow that through, that terminology, the heaven and the earth, that separation of terminology is all the way through your Bible. So in the very beginning, it looked like there was two different things going on here. Well, the reason I bring that up is because when we're talking about the creature not having the capacity to properly function, if he was able to properly function, what if Satan was able to do what God is going to do in the dispensation of the fullness of time? And that is to take all the things in heaven and all the things in earth and to bring them together into one under Satan. What if he had been able to do that? You know what that would have done? That would have made much stronger his hold on the heavens and the earth. In other words, you wouldn't be able to just do one thing and get rid of one of them. Now there would be an integrated whole there. I confess to you, I don't know all the implications that Satan would attempt. I mean, what would happen if that were to be the case? I really haven't devoted a lot of time to thinking about that, but it's ominous to me to think. Go back to the Tower of Babel. Remember what they were doing? They were building a tower that may what? Reach unto heaven. And I know that's before God stretched out the heavens and all that kind of business and all that changed. My point is this, though. Why were they trying to do that? This wasn't their version of space exploration. They were trying to join together the connection between heaven and earth. Satan was behind that thing. That wasn't God behind that. So if he's behind that, he's still trying to get that done. I think what God does is he disables the creature so that cannot be done. Or if it's going to be done, it's going to have to be done manually somehow. Somebody's going to have to get up there. And even if you got up there, what would you do? I mean, I don't know. But obviously, Satan knows something about it. But now, in the first part, that's what I wanted you to see, that there was no capacity for the creature to fully function. Now, God did that part. But here's the part, and if we were looking at verse 20, here's the part that I see where it says, not willingly. Because that involves the second part of being made subject to vanity, that now the creature is going to be under the control of Satan and his angels. That's the part I see the creature kicking and screaming about. Because he's not created to be in ungodliness and unrighteousness. So what you have is you have two parts here. When it's being made subject to vanity, God is... Remember what Teresa said in the first session? What's happening to the creature is a real good picture of what's happening to you. God is not going to stand between the creature and those fallen angels in those principalities, powers, thrones, mights, and dominions. They are up there in control. And guess what? He's not going to stand between you and the policy of evil either. Not doing it for the creature, not doing it for you. But what he is going to do is he's going to give the creature a hope that one day all of that is going to change. Not only will he be brought to fullness of function, but we're going to change out who's running the creature. And he knows who that is. It's the sons of God. He knows when? At the manifestation of the sons of God. And that's the creature's hope. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to just show you the commentary. We mentioned at the break, we were talking about Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, and the passages that go back to Satan's rebellion and trafficking his iniquity among these angels and all that kind of business. Let me give you some other verses that we could look at along with this, because Job talks about this. He says, well, here's the two parts of vanity. The inability of the creature to fully and properly function. The creature is going to come under the dominion of the adversary and his ungodly host. And so there's the two parts. That's why I see the creature was made subject to vanity. Here's this part. Not willingly. Here's this part. Did everybody see that? All right, and I think there's a distinction there. I think there's two components to that being made subject to vanity. But look at John 4:17. Shall mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his Maker? Behold, he put no trust in his servants, and his angels he charged with folly. Do you know what that's a reference to? That rebellion among the angels to join Lucifer. Look at this next one in Job 15:14. What is man that he should be clean, and he which is born of a woman that he should be righteous? Behold, he putteth no trust in his saints, yea, the heavens are not clean in his sight. So, God's got these comments. I got one more for you. Job 25:4. How then can a man be justified with God? Or how can he be clean that is born of a woman? Behold, even to the moon, and it shineth not. Yea, the stars are not pure in his sight. And you know as well as I do that angels are often called stars in your Bible. By the way, that's the place of their habitation anyway, up there with those physical stars. Now, I know that I've talked quite a bit about this. We've had a big conversation about the information in verse 20. And I want to be honest with you, not because I normally am not. I don't know why I say it. Verse 20 is not meant to be a treatise on the fall of Satan. That's not what's going on in Romans 8:20. Are you with me on that? When verse 20 is talking to you here, the creature is made subject to vanity, it's not trying to teach you the whole doctrine about Satan's fall and all the things that took place with that fall. That's not what God's interested in doing right here. We already know some things about it by the time you get to Romans 8, but that's not what's happening here. He's really talking about the predicament that the creature has been placed in. All right, the next thing, number 2, that I put on my list, and we really got to hurry here, is that the creature was made submissive against his will. Now, I've already commented to you on that I think that part of that had to do with this component, that the creature was now going to come under the control not of God and His angels, but of Satan and his angels. And I think that's the part that was even worse for the creature than being disabled. I think when the creature gets disabled and God says, I can't allow Satan to utilize you, the creature is probably thinking, yeah, I don't want to be utilized by that guy. But when God says, but you know what? They're still sitting in those seats even though they've rebelled. I think that's the part the creature is going, I hate this part. And even though it doesn't know about its future deliverance yet, it may well be thinking, maybe God will do something to undo this. But in the meantime, I don't want to be under the control of this adversary. Now that's the way I see it. Have those other 3, there was a reason the creature was made subject to vanity. It's because God didn't want the adversary to utilize him. The creature has a hope of deliverance from that. Now he knows that that's us. And the one that made him subject to vanity is the same one that gave him a hope, and that's God. All right. So, here's the first part that I'm going to give you. The creature being made subject to vanity is not Satan rebelling. Satan didn't do that. So what, in that sense, can you fill in the blank for me there? If it's not what Satan did when he got the angels that control the creature to rebel, it is really, you know, God did it, but in what context? Boy, this question is way too broad. I keep struggling to ask it in a better way. Can anybody just take what I've said so far and take a stab at this? I know the question is way too broad. I don't know how to narrow it down. I'll just say it. Being made subject to vanity is God's response to the rebellion. That makes sense to you? It's not the rebellion itself. And I don't want you to confuse those. Because if you get to thinking that, you're going to forget, you know, what's happening there in verse 20. The creature being made subject to vanity is God's response to a rebellion that has already taken place. Otherwise, there'd be no need to do that to the creature. Everybody with me on that? All right. Now, I gave you some of those questions. I'm not going to re-ask them again now at the end of your last homework assignment. I think you could answer most of those questions now. Why was the creature, you know, who made him subject to vanity? Why was he unwilling? I think you can figure that out. I think you see those kinds of things. What I need to do here, though, is show you the next thing that the creature was made subject to. For the creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who hath subjected the same in hope. So just as, I mentioned this back in the first session, just as the creature is made subject to vanity, he is also made subject to hope. And now he knows God's not going to intervene by his miracle working power to just snap his fingers and do away with all of it. He's going to utilize educated sons to come and fix this whole thing. Those bad angels are going to be removed, and my function is going to be restored. And that's what the creature is expecting. And I think you understand that as well. We have spent a long time with regard to that. I'm going to make a statement here, and then I need to talk to you about this. This is the part you don't have any notes on. I actually gave you a paragraph and explained to you I am not including this in your notes on purpose. And the reason I'm not is because I'm going to break a rule. And I didn't want to do that in writing. So if someone is just looking at the notes, they're not going to take the same trip that you and I are about to take. But in your notes, I made a statement that what God is doing by giving this creature this hope, I just took this opportunity to say that by giving the creature hope, God was doing this. Showing mercy. Now that may not seem like a big deal. But I want to talk to you about this issue just for a second. And I am going to break a rule. And the rule I'm going to break is I'm going to take you way ahead in the curriculum. And I'm going to show you something that I think it will make this have more impact for you. That's what I'm hoping. It's the only reason I'm doing it. No, the Bible didn't give it to you in this order, so I'm not correcting the Bible by saying this. I'm just saying my statement. The Bible doesn't use the word mercy here. Did you notice that? So when I say in the notes, God is showing mercy, I'm really talking about something that I know is coming up for you, but you haven't gotten yet. So let me set this up for you. The Apostle Paul has people who minister right alongside of him. in the book of Acts, Barnabas does that. Later, Timothy does that. He labors right. Paul calls him a fellow laborer in the gospel. And there are those that come right alongside Paul. They're preaching that message of grace, and they're laboring with Paul. But then you've got another group of people who are ministering to Paul, and they're not so much out there preaching the message and doing that kind of work with Paul, but what they're doing is they're ministering to Paul's needs. And they're making it possible for him to go do what he's doing, because they're doing some things that are making his life so that he can do that. Just to give you an analogy, when this assembly pays my salary, I'm able to go and do things that most of us don't have time to go do. And then I come and give it to you. And that sounds very crass, but I mean, you know, really, that's what it is. That's what it is. And when the Bible makes the analogy, it talks about the ox and, you know, which I don't really, you know, I mean, it's not a very flattering analogy, is it? Okay. But when Paul has some people, they minister to his needs, they hold a special place in Paul's life. Paul, however, also has another group. And I don't know if it's a group. I just know of one or two. They're not laboring in what he's doing. They're not out there doing what he's doing. And they're not ministering to his needs. They are ministering to Paul's wants. And I'm not talking about wants like, well, I want a new Mercedes. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genuine wants for ministry's sake, not consume it upon your own lust wants. Does everybody understand what I'm saying about when I talk about this? Huh? Well, there is some peace of mind in that. But I have some verses, and I'm going to take you over and show you. I think I've got them on the PowerPoint, so you won't have to turn there in your Bible. We haven't talked about this issue, but I am going to take you to Philippians chapter 2. And I will tell you, out of all the advanced books in Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, you'll get in more trouble probably in Philippians than any of them if you don't come at it from the standpoint of sonship. There's a lot of things in Philippians that you will just tear completely apart if you don't understand sonship. And I have a lot of commentaries on Philippians, and unfortunately that's what gets done. Now, that aside, let me take you to this. Actually, I'm going to take you to another verse first, because just to show you that there are some people. I talked about Timothy and Barnabas laboring with Paul, actually getting out there and doing what he was doing. But there were some that ministered to his needs. Onesiphorus was one of those. And he talks about him in 2 Timothy. Here it is, 2 Timothy 1:16. Now I want you to notice the terminology here. The Lord give mercy unto the house of Onesiphorus. Now I want you to notice what he's asking here. The Lord do what? Give mercy. That's the reason I got off on this, is because I made a comment in your notes. I said, this hope that God has given the creature, God is showing mercy. But I said that out of something I know. And I almost erased it out of the notes. And I thought, you know what? No, I'm going to talk to you about it, because I want you to see what this showing mercy is. This is very relevant for you. It says, the Lord give mercy unto the house of Onesiphorus, for he oft refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chain. You know, he's talking about here in prison. Now, he oft refreshed me. Onesiphorus wasn't out there preaching. You know what he was doing? He was ministering to Paul's needs, is what he was doing while he was in prison. But when he was in Rome, he sought me out very diligently and found me. The Lord grant unto him that he may find, there's that word again, mercy of the Lord in that day. And in how many things he ministered unto me at Ephesus, thou knowest very well. So here's a guy that, he just knew this. Paul needs somebody to be looking out for him. He made it his business to track Paul down. By the way, you don't see it all from this account. There was some real peril here in doing what he was doing. Finding Paul and knowing that he was in prison and going and minister to Paul was putting his very life at stake in this. But there's that one. Well, Paul has that, and he makes mention of it. But in Philippians chapter 2, he talks about another man called Epaphroditus. And when he talks about him, he's going to tell you exactly how he ministered to Paul. So let's just read the passage. Philippians 2:25. Yet I supposed it necessary to send to you Epaphroditus, my brother, and companion in labor and fellow soldier, but your messenger, and he that ministered to my wants. That word is not in there by accident. Paul is saying, this is something different, and I have a different relationship with this guy. And indeed he did. Verse 26, for he longed after you all, and was full of heaviness, because that you had heard that he had been sick. Now I'm about to read the rest of the passage. This is the only verse that people will go to in Paul's epistles to say, see here, he was sick and God healed him. But that's not what the verse says. But that's how they'll interpret it, because that's what they're after. I just want to show you what's happening here. By the way, I'm not after the sick part anyway. I'm after the mercy part. But here we go. Verse 27. For indeed he was sick nigh unto death. But look what it says. But God had mercy on him. Now people read that and they say, see? He was almost about to die and God had mercy. Which means they think God did what? Kept him from dying. That's not what it said. If he'd have said he healed him, guess what it would have said? That's right. But instead, it used a term that by the time you get to Philippians, you're supposed to already know what that means. And you don't. I'm not saying that to discourage you or to act like you don't know anything, but you haven't been through it yet. You can't know this yet. You will, and I'll show you where. But let's keep reading this. But God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but on me also. Was Paul sick unto death? So you see, if you're going to make mercy being healed, now you've made Paul sick unto death. That's not what's going on here. Do you see that? See, you can't be inconsistent with it right there in the same verse, in the same phrase. You can't do that. So Paul says, and he had mercy on him, not on him only, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. I sent him therefore the more carefully. And notice when Paul says, I'm sending him to you carefully, because the guy hasn't made a full recovery yet. But he's going to do this because Paul has a want for the Philippians to know something. And Epaphroditus goes, I'll do it. And Paul's going, I'm sending to you carefully. Because this guy, and I want you to look at what he says. That when you see him again, you may rejoice, and that I may be the less sorrowful. Receive him therefore in the Lord with all gladness, and hold such in reputation, because for the work of Christ he was nigh unto death, not regarding his life to supply your lack of service toward me. He said this guy wasn't even counting on what it was going to do to him. He was in. And it almost killed him. All right, now I have a couple of things to say to you about that so that you can really understand. That phrase, verse 27, for indeed he was nigh sick unto death, but God had mercy on him. Now I've talked to you about Paul saying, and on me also. It didn't mean Paul was sick. That phrase, that he had mercy, is going to take you back. I don't have much room here, do I? That is going to take you back to your education in godly wisdom in Romans chapter 12, where wisdom is going to get broken into 6 parts, and one of those parts that you learn in godly wisdom, listen, let me say it like this. In godly wisdom, this assembly learns how to treat each other. If we're going to be sons and daughters, and we're going to do this right, if we're really going to function right, we've got to see each other differently, and we've got to treat each other differently. And you're going to get 6 components to that, and we're going to get taken through it together. And one of those components is showing mercy. Now you say, I already know how to show mercy. Well, I know that you know something about showing mercy. I don't think you're just totally bereft. But there is something about showing mercy that you haven't been taught yet. I not only want to show you that this is sitting in your education right off the bat. By the way, when it talks about you learning the showing mercy, then in Corinthians, that's Romans, then in Corinthians, here's what Paul does. When the Corinthians get themselves back on track and they begin to treat each other the way they're supposed to treat each other, and they do some things for each other, Paul commends them, but he doesn't say, you did it. He says it this way, God did it. Now, why would he do that? Why would he say God did it? I'm going to tell you why. Because in showing mercy, you are laboring with your Father in what He is doing. And God says, and when you do it, you are doing it as an extension of me. That brings me to my next point. We get this idea. It's not, I've tried to say it without jumping ahead and showing you a bunch of stuff. But since I'm doing it now, let me go ahead and let the whole cat out of the bag. When you, let me just think how to say this. It's more than just you're laboring with Him. You're doing what He would do. We get this idea. We get this idea that when we're suffering, that God isn't doing anything. You know that's not right. God is doing something. What is He doing? Okay, suffering with us, okay.
He helps you endure.
Okay, what God is doing, what do people want when they're suffering? What do they want God to do? The normal thing. What do they want? They want God to physically intervene in their circumstances. But God's not going to do that. But He is going to do something. What is He doing? Okay, He uses that. What God is doing is not in the outward circumstances. What He's doing is a work in the inward man. He's given you comfort. As Gloria said, He's causing you to endure. The work He's interested in doing by the excellency of the power of His Word effectually working in your inner man is not to take those things away, but for you to be more, where's that book? More than a conqueror while you're going through them. Yes? So He is doing something. It's just He's not doing what people normally think of God doing from His program with Israel. But what I never told you about, because it would necessitate breaking my rule, we'll just call this official Break the Rule Day, and then we'll go back to normal and we won't do this anymore. But He is doing something else. And listen carefully. He's doing something in your physical circumstances. Now, I know I told you God's not doing it in the outward. He's doing it in the inward. That is true. So let me refine it. God is doing something in your physical circumstances. He is. But He is not doing it by His omnipotent, miracle-working power. Do you know how He is doing it? He's doing it by other members of the body of Christ. Let me give you an example. There's a lot of ways to illustrate this, but let's suppose that something is happening with, I can't even make up the circumstance, but something happens with Ruby, and she's really suffering. And she's going through some very hard times. The very first thing that Ruby would need to concentrate on is the effectual working of the Word in her inner man to strengthen her, to give her endurance, and to bring her a comfort in the midst of that. And I know that people tend to look at that and go, well, that's pretty shoddy, because I'm still going through it. But what is she getting in exchange for that? What, did you say strength? She is, but what else? What else is she getting? What else is she going to get? A glory that cannot be compared, that suffering can be compared with. She's going to get a glory for that. But God doesn't look at that and go, well, Ruby's suffering, big deal, suck it up and, be a man. Oh, you can't, you're a woman, okay. Well, He's not doing that. He is going to teach this body, to look at Ruby and understanding that they now know how to show mercy, we'll actually go and in some ways lessen the effects of the physical circumstances that are making her life difficult. Are you with me there? And when you do, if Paul was writing about it, here's what he'd say. God had mercy on Ruby. It didn't mean God miraculously intervened by His miracle-working power to change her circumstances. What it meant was the things that did get done in her physical circumstances were carried out by sons and daughters who, from their sonship education, know what's involved in those 6 components of wisdom, one of which is showing mercy. And they would come, and to the best of their ability, they would alleviate some of those physical circumstances. And when they do, they're not only laboring with their Father, but that is how He is showing her mercy. You say, well, but someone else is doing it. Yeah, but you know why they're doing it? Because the sonship education has instructed them. Does that make sense to you? See? And if Linda went over to the house, she would do that anyway. If her mom was going, oh, I'm just not. You know what she would say? Mom, lay down here. Let me put a pillow under your head. How does that feel? And everybody goes, well, that's a lot better, but this thing I've got to get that done. If Linda goes, I'll do that. Now, I'm still not bridging all of what showing mercy is about, but I'm trying to give you an illustration you can live with, and that is, if she's got her head rested on the pillow and Linda's doing her work, which, by the way, is not a bad gig if you're paying attention to this, Ruby. But if you've got that, if what Ruby needs, do you know what? It may not take away all of Ruby's problem, but guess what? To some degree, her physical circumstances got changed. But it wasn't by God waving His hand and parting the Red Sea. It was by an educated son getting involved in showing mercy. Does that tell you anything? Now I'm going to tell you the very personal part of the story. So how is it that God then is having mercy? By the way, do you remember that first thing where Paul, let me back us up. That one. The Lord give mercy unto the house of Onesiphorus because of all the things he's done for me. Do you know what he's really asking for? What, is that just a broad thing? Oh, God, just have mercy on the house of Onesiphorus. Like, that's pretty broad, isn't it? Mercy about what? His electric bill? I mean, I'm just saying. What is God really asking here? What is Paul really saying here? The Lord give mercy unto the... Why is he even... He's writing that to the pastor of an assembly. You know what he intends for that assembly to do? They're supposed to do that which comes under that heading of showing mercy. When he comes to Philippians and he says, God had mercy on him, what got done for Epaphroditus was not God miraculously intervening, because Paul said, he had mercy on me too, lest I'd have sorrow upon sorrow. The fact that Epaphroditus lived, Paul equated with, God had mercy on me too. My dad, when he first came to live with me, his wife had passed away. My mom had died years earlier and Dad remarried. She passed away. He was in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and when he came to live with me, he had given up. He went to see my sister for about a month, just before Christmas. And she called me on the phone every day and she said, every morning I expect to get up and find him gone. He was listless. He couldn't think. He went from planning this funeral and having that funeral service to, I don't know where I am. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing. He couldn't move. He did live through Christmas, I went and got him. I can remember where all the kids came in to see their grandpa, and we were sitting at a table. We were in a Chili's eating lunch. He didn't want to go, but I got him to go, and he said, I got to go to the men's room. And I said, okay, Dad. I said, you know where it is. And he got up from his chair, and he just began to turn like this and just walk very slowly like this. And I mean, a minute later, he was only a few feet away. Everything was listless and lifeless. And I can remember when I was on the weekend working, and I called the house and talked to my daughter, and I said, is your grandpa up? And she said, I haven't seen him up. I'll go check on him. So she went back. She said, no, he's still laying in the bed. And it suddenly dawned on me that all these years that I've been so close to my dad, he finally got to come and stay with me, and it wasn't going to be anything like I thought it was going to be. And I thought I was going to lose my dad, and it just overwhelmed me in that moment. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to say this in a way where you'll understand it. I got to a place where I couldn't say anything on the phone because I knew that as soon as I said another word, I was just going to cry. I was going to be overwhelmed with it. And I remember hearing my daughter say, Dad, are you okay? And I couldn't even answer her that I was okay. And I pulled the truck over on the side of the road, and I remember just being swept up in this emotion that I'm not going to be able to hang on to my dad any longer. And she said, Dad, are you okay? Are you okay? And I could hear on the phone my dad said, what's going on? And she said, he's crying, Grandpa. And he said, why? And she said, because he thinks you're going to die. And there was a little bit of a pause, and I heard, I heard my dad say, tell him I'll be okay. Well, you know, and she told me, and I said, yeah, I heard him. And when I got back, you know what he had made? He had made a decision. I'm going to live. And he began to recover. And after that, he would go to the church to work with me. And in the morning, we'd cook breakfast together. Bob Butler knows. When Bob picked me up to go to the church to work, we'd pick my dad up. We'd go to the church. We'd fix breakfast. Me and Bob and Dad would eat breakfast in the morning. And then I'd go to work. Bob would go to work. And my dad would go in and clean up the breakfast dishes and start getting ready for lunch. He mowed the yard at the church. He drove his truck down to dump the trash. And then we'd have Bible study on Tuesday nights. And Dad would show up early on Tuesday night and make homemade rolls. And I'm going to tell you, when you came in that building and you smelled fresh, hot bread, man, there was almost nothing you could smell that was any better than that. And he'd have 150 homemade rolls on big plates just heaped up and have jellies and different butter and different stuff to put on them. A few times he went down to the store and he got that real thin sliced roast beef and ham and just had it sitting out. You could cut that bread open and pile a bunch of roast beef on it. And okay, we'll dismiss for lunch now. But, you know, I'm just saying, he recovered to do all of that again before that disease finally took him over. But you know what he did? He made a decision. I'm not going to do that. And I know why he made that decision. Because he knew it was breaking my heart. Well, that's not an exact illustration, but I'm going to tell you, we're going to learn something about showing mercy. That sometime when someone is really nigh unto death. Let me ask you a question before I finish that. For an educated son, do you really think death is a problem? No. Paul wrote about it one chapter earlier in Philippians 1. For I am in a strait betwixt two, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, to abide in the flesh is more needful for you. And having this confidence, I know that I shall abide and continue with you all for your furtherance and joy of faith. You know what that is? Paul's saying to them, same thing my dad said to me. I'm ready to go. I want to go. It's better if I go. But I'm needed right here. So I'm going to stick around. And sometimes the godly act of showing mercy for someone who is even nigh unto death is what they needed to hear to make them say, I'm not done. And these folks had come around Epaphroditus and said, yeah, we know. You're not afraid of this. We know. And it's because of your work in this ministry that you're even in this condition. But you're not done yet. There's more. And we know what you want to do, because it's what we want to do. But we also understand what's at stake here. And because of their words, Epaphroditus recovers. And now he's going to make his way to Philippi. And when Paul writes about it, you know how he writes it? God had mercy. What did they do to intervene in his physical circumstances? Paul doesn't give us the list. But back when you're taught in Romans 12 about showing mercy, you're going to find out there's something that God is interested in. Somebody's going through a horrible suffering, and it's not all going to get alleviated. You understand? Just because we come in the door, if you're suffering and this assembly comes in the door, I don't want you to throw a party thinking, hot dog, my suffering is over. We'll alleviate some of that. Some of that's, you're going to endure it. Are we going to try to bring you comfort? We are. But I have to tell you, that's how you know God's not disinterested. He has a way to do that. But He has not chosen to do that through His omnipotent power. He has chosen to do that through sons and daughters who can speak intelligently to someone to alleviate some of those physical sufferings, to bring them some comfort, to help them out. No, it won't solve it all. But when it's done, you're going to look at what they did. And when this crew walks out of your house, you're going to say, God showed mercy on me. Because just like for the Corinthians, what they went and did, Paul says God did that. Do you see how this is connected up? Is this just marvelous to me? Are you getting a glimpse of this a little bit? That when this education really starts happening, he'll take this thing about showing mercy, and then he's going to take it into Corinthians, and when they show mercy, he's going to say, boy, God did that. And you're going to go, well, I understand. I was laboring with my Father. This is how He chooses to do it, through me. And then he gets over to Onesiphorus and he says, God have mercy on this guy. And he's not just talking about a general prayer like God bless, Ruby. He's talking about something very specific the body of Christ is supposed to get involved in. And then when he gets over to Epaphroditus, and he says, here's the condition the guy was in, but he decided to stick around, God had mercy on him. And guess what? On me too. Me too. That's a role we're going to play. I just look at this curriculum, folks, and I see how it builds on itself and what it means and how God's chosen to do things. And it is much more marvelous to me than God waving a magic wand and parting the Red Sea. This is way more marvelous than that. And you get to have a part in that. A genuine part in that. That's what this education is pointing us to. Okay, well, I took up all my time with that illustration. Those are the things that are not in the notes. But I think you needed to hear that. I wanted you to hear that. I don't think God's standing up there with a stick going, don't go to Philippians, don't go to Philippians. Whack! I told you not to go to Philippians. I don't think that's what He's doing. I understand, but there's a sense and sequence to this thing. But I want you to see that when I wrote in there, God's having mercy on the creature, not by His miraculous omnipotent power intervening on the creature's behalf. Guess how He's going to show mercy to the creature? The same way He's going to show mercy to anybody. He's going to send the body of Christ to do it. Do you just see how perfect that is? Okay, I'm going to go home to go, man, that was great. You're all going to go home going, what was that about? But there it is.
We call it compassion and empathy and things like that.
There are and by the way, it won't surprise you to know that when you get over there and he talks about mercy, he's going to define that in a very particular way for you to let you know that that's the precise word choice that's been. I'm not saying that none of us have ever been merciful or had compassion. We've done those kinds of things, but we only learned about it from the standpoint of what we could learn about it from the wisdom of men. Now your Father's going to say, I'm going to show you some components of this you would have never knew existed unless I told you about them. This is going to be a great deal for us. All right, take your notes home. The last thing we've already kind of covered, and that's the hope of the creature. You already know that's you, right? When we come back next week, we're jumping into verse 21. I can hardly wait for us to get in there. There's something sitting in verse 21. It's just great. That verse says, the creature itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption. Just as a hint, the bondage of corruption is not the same thing as being made subject to vanity. Those are two different things. Second thing to know, why the word also? Why use that word also? Because if you look at it, you could actually see that that verse would make perfect sense without it. Because the creature itself shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption. Why the word also? Here's the last question. Why the word itself? Because the creature also shall be delivered from the bondage. That makes perfect sense too. But those two words inserted into that verse tell you something that is absolutely magnificent. So why don't you work on that this week? Just take a look at it, break it down into parts, ask yourself some questions, and see what you come up with. Teresa?
We all
Are we off?